We had a big front porch in the house that I grew up on. It was on Roosevelt Avenue at 1371 East, and it was a big house with a big front porch. And my sisters and I would go out and play all day long on the front porch. We would pretend we were mothers. We would pretend we were school teachers. Would pretend we were ladies and going out for the day. In the backyard, we had another big area to play in. We had big trees. My dad and brother built a big tree house out in the backyard. And since I was the little sister, I was able to climb up and also play in there with them. We had a lot of trees. We had peach trees and apple trees, and we also had a big swing in the backyard. We didn't have electronics, so our playtime was in the yard or in the house. We had a neighbor named Mary Howells, and she was excellent at making candy. And all the neighbors would want to run down the street and watch Mrs. Howells make candy. She had a marble rolling pin. She had a marble countertop. And we would sit for hours. It was fascinating. And then we got to eat some of the candy. She was very good about sharing. Before it was maybe trendy to have family home evenings, my parents held family home evenings in our home, and we loved them. We got together, and there were five children in our family at that time, and we would get together and our parents would play with us. We played board games. We played card games. I was really good at card games and board games. We were pretty competitive in our family, and of course I always wanted to win. So I learned how to play and practice, and I loved playing games with my family. We loved to visit with our grandparents and our cousins. Every single Sunday we would go to church, we would have dinner, and then we would go and visit our grandparents. I was really lucky in that all of my grandparents lived in Salt Lake, so we were able to go see them every Sunday. All the cousins gathered there together, and they were all able. This is why I love my cousins so much, because I did get to know them by going to my grandparents, and I got to know my grandparents well, and my aunts and uncles, because that was a big part of my life. And we loved our cousins and grandparents. My grandmother, Dean, lived right close to us, in the same ward, in fact. So we got to see her every Sunday. But we would go over to her house at night, and then all the cousins would come over and visit. And my grandparents on my mother's side, Laura and Francis Salzner, they lived in Sugar House. So again, it was pretty close. And we were able to go down there and visit with them, and we would play in their big backyard. They always had food. They had a wonderful old house where the cousins could go and explore. They had a piano we could play. It was just a marvelous time. I learned to love my grandparents and my cousins. And that started me in doing family reunions. And we held family reunions every single year. So that gave us a really good chance of getting to know our cousins and our aunts and uncles. And I think that's why we've stayed so close as a family. I was so excited to go to school. I was the youngest of 5 children at the time, and so I was home alone since all my other brothers and sisters were in school. So I was so excited when it finally became my turn to go to school. And the very first day of kindergarten, I went out and I was running and jumping and playing. I was kind of a tomboy. I loved to run and play. And I was on the playground doing flips on the tricky bars. and fell my very first day. Big cut across my forehead. So, of course, I was bleeding, and everyone came running over and making such a big fuss. And I ended up going to the doctors. They called my mother. She came to the school, and she took me down to Dr. Tom Robinson. His office was in Sugar House. And I remember it was really scary to be down there. It was the first time I had had stitches, and I couldn't believe that that happened on my very first day of school. I always wanted to be a teacher. I loved school, absolutely loved it. From my first day of kindergarten, falling and going to the doctor that day. But I loved teaching. I'll bet I could give you 95% of the names of all the teachers that I had through elementary school, through junior high, high school, even college. I always looked forward to school. I loved to study. I loved to learn. So I always wanted to be a teacher. I had a fun experience in 7th grade. I had a man who was a teacher, Mr. Belt. He was young, he was handsome, he was so fun. And so a girlfriend and I decided that we would like to go to his house. So we figured out we could take a bus from where we lived, and I lived on Nevada Street, 1700 South. Our address was 1729 Nevada Street. And so we got on a bus and we went as far south as we could. We had the teacher's address. He lived on Boxwood Street, just south of 6200 South. So off we went on the bus. And then we went as far as it would go on Highland Drive. Then we had to get off the bus and walk the rest of the way. Well, I tell you, he was so surprised when we knocked on his door. And he wondered how on earth we got there. And we told him we took the bus. So he was in one way happy to see us, and in another way very unhappy at us that we made all that effort to come. So he made us call our parents, and he drove us back home. But it was fun to go see his house, and we just loved him. We just loved him. I had wonderful teachers of music. I started in the 9th grade singing in the choirs, and we had a 9th grade choir, a chorus. Mrs. Schultz taught us music in the 9th grade at Hillside Junior High. And it was really fun. She taught us how to sing parts and how to sing intervals. And music was fascinating to me. I really enjoyed it. And that led me to go on and to sing in the choirs at Highland High. So I was able to sing in the a cappella choirs at Highland High as well. I enjoyed playing the violin. And I started the violin when I was in 4th grade at Beacon Heights Elementary School. I played all through grade school, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. Then I played in the junior high orchestra, 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then I played at Highland High, my sophomore, junior, and senior year. I never was great at it. It wasn't like I was first chair or anything, but I loved to play the violin. It was fun. I loved to be in the orchestra. I always loved music and enjoyed playing in the orchestra and playing the beautiful music. An activity that I enjoyed, not only playing in an orchestra, but I enjoyed going to the Utah Symphony. We had connections with a friend of a friend, and they were able to get us to be ushers at the Utah Symphony concerts. What a privilege. I didn't have to pay, and I was able to get in and hear all the beautiful concerts. It gave me a great appreciation for the wonderful music that we have been given. My mother loved good music, and she played the great concertos and symphonies in our home. And then for me to be able to play them in our school orchestras, and then to be able to go to the Utah Symphony concerts, it just enlightened me and gave me a good appreciation for music. The first experience I'm going to tell you about in high school was the very first time I took an airplane ride. I had applied for a trip with the American Red Cross. I had been active in the Utah Red Cross all through junior high and into high school. And they were talking about a centennial celebration of the 100th birthday of the International Red Cross. Now, the International Red Cross started out in Switzerland. So they were gathering people all over the world to go to Switzerland to represent their countries, and in this big celebration. We were involved in a parade, and I got to hold the American flag walking in this parade. They selected 16 students from throughout all of the United States. And one of the requirements was that we needed to have experience in Red Cross, which I had. I had been volunteering at that point for 4 years in the Red Cross doing service. And then we had to know a foreign language, either German or French. And I started taking German in my 8th grade at Hillside. So I had 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th, and 11th grade. So I had 4 years of studying the German language. So I applied, and I was selected as one of the 16 to go representing the American Red Cross. And we traveled. It was the first time I'd been on an airplane. And I mean, goodness, nowadays our grandkids are going on the airplane before they're even a year old. Well, here I was between my junior and senior year, and it was my very first airplane flight. As it turned out, it was called back then the Champagne flight. So I got on the airplane, and we took off from Salt Lake, and they immediately began to serve champagne. Now, I am a Mormon, and we don't drink champagne. Well, I was so naive. I wasn't sure what it was. They didn't announce this is alcohol. They just gave me the drink. And so I sipped it, and it was nasty. It was so bad. So that was my first experience on an airplane and drinking champagne. So after I spit it out, I said, "What is this drink?" And then they told me it was champagne, which is alcohol, of course. And so my experience was alcohol and champagne were nasty, and I did not want to partake. While we were in Europe with the Red Cross, we experienced some very heartwarming, touching stories. We went to Auschwitz, which was a prisoner of war camp. And we saw the horrors of war and the awful, awful things that Hitler and his people were doing to the Jewish people. It broke my heart to see the way they were treated, to see how cruel, how very cruel they were to those people. I was impressed while we were there to reflect on the history that we had been studying in school. And it brought back a lot of memories of how how very awful war is, and how painful it is. One fun thing that came out of that trip was we were able to go and visit school classes. And I love school, love everything about it. I love the Red Cross. I love serving people. And back in those days, we made special little kits in school. And they were just little boxes. And we would fill them with a toothbrush, toothpaste, a comb, a brush, a little box of Kleenexes, a pencil, an eraser. And we would package them up and send them off. Well, when I was over in Poland, we saw these boxes reach the children there in school. And as we walked in, I just shed a little tear. I thought, our boxes really do end up on the desk of people who need them and who appreciate them. And it was very a touching moment to see that. Another activity we did over in Europe was we were able to go to a work site. And when we were on this trip, we just weren't on a vacation. We went and did work. And one of the spots that we did work at was at a building site. This was just, it was in 1963, so it was 20 years after the war ended. The war ended in 1945. And here I was in 1963, and I tell you, the buildings were still bombed out. They hadn't been reconstructed. I was amazed. I was absolutely amazed that the part of Europe we saw was still so torn apart from World War II. It was amazing to me, absolutely amazing. So at one location, we went and we worked all day chipping off the old brick from a home so that the bricks could be reused. That was pretty amazing to me that they were doing that. They weren't throwing the bricks away. They were cleaning them off to be reused in building another house. While I was at Highland High, I participated in debate. I loved speech and debate. It was fun to me. It was challenging to me. So I started out my sophomore year taking speech. And my teacher was Mr. Bowthorpe. He was amazing. He was amazing. We loved Mr. Bowthorpe. And he taught me how to speak, how to give an oration, how to do extemporaneous speeches, and how to debate. And we went on with our debate, and in 1964, my senior year, we took state in debate. It was really, really fun. My partner in debate was Lynn Tannenbaum. And oh, how I loved Lynn. In fact, today, this is 2017, Lynn and I are still close friends. And we talk often, we visit all the time. We can get together and we can talk for 6 hours straight and visit and catch up. But we started to be friends in junior high, and then in high school we became debate partners. Now Lynn is probably an unusual friend in that Lynn is very Jewish and I am very Mormon. But we clicked off. It just worked. Our friendship worked. And we don't criticize each other for our differences in religion. Instead, we find how common our beliefs are and how both the Mormons and the Jewish people have suffered persecution from other people. Lynn and I are very good friends, and I really do enjoy her and enjoy talking with her. we were a great team, and we have a great friendship. One of the positive things that came out of debate was I learned to know what to do in a library. Lynn and I were at the library almost on a daily basis. I learned how to use the card catalog. I learned how to do research. I learned how to take notes. I learned how to stand up and speak and to prove a point and to debate a point. And these skills have lasted me throughout my life. I am so grateful for that experience of being on the debate team, and especially being a partner with Lynn. There were many people who were older than I was, and we would get together and do almost like a fireside, like we would do in church. And the older kids who were in debate would teach us and give us thoughts and ideas to inspire us to learn and to study and to know about what was going on in the world. Those years were valuable years to me. I'm now going to talk about my family, and this is a happy thing to talk about. I found myself in a situation after getting a divorce that I was looking for a new husband. And my neighbor, Liz Long, called and said, "Margaret, do you remember Doug Bagley from high school?" And I smiled and I said, "Of course I remember Doug Bagley. He was popular, he was fun, he was outgoing, he was friendly. He was really a fun young man in high school." And I double dated at one point with him. I went over to his home one evening for a fireside, and chairs were set up in the living room, and Leon Peterson was the speaker that night. And I was there with a date. I wasn't with Doug, but he was there, and I got to meet him, so I knew who he was. I learned to meet a lot of people from other schools because of my involvement in Red Cross and my involvement in debate. So I knew people from all the different schools in Salt Lake. So that was really a bonus. My neighbor, Liz, called Doug and said, "Doug, why don't you call Margaret? She is divorced from her husband, and why don't you give her a call?" And so he did. He called me. So we started to talk on the phone, and it was so fun for me. He was friendly and fun, and he was full of enthusiasm, and that is just what I needed at that time. I was left with 6 children, and Doug had 3 children, and so we would get to go out and take all of our kids, and it was a fun time. Doug and I would talk on the phone every night. I was working full-time, he was working, so he would call me at night after we had our dinner done with our family and our children, and then Doug and I would visit. I found out, after I noticed a little pattern, he would never call me on Thursday nights. And it took me a little while for me to ask. I said, "Now, what do you do on Thursday? How come you never call me on a Thursday?" Well, he finally admitted he had his favorite TV show, Hill Street Blues, and it came on every Thursday night. So I found out he really enjoyed TV and really enjoyed it, and he still does today. But it was just funny that all the time we were talking and getting acquainted, Thursday night, totally off limit. He had that special night for his TV show. When we were dating, It happened to be over Valentine's Day. And February 14th came, the doorbell rang, and the kids and I went to answer the door. There was this big box of chocolates on the porch. I mean, 5 pounds, a 5-pound box of chocolate. Well, we were so excited. We brought it in the house and opened it, and we all tasted it. Delicious. Oh my, such good chocolates. And we couldn't believe how many they were. And so we thought, now, who could have brought 5 pounds of chocolate? Well, it didn't take us long till we thought, okay, this came from Doug. And sure enough, it did. Every now and then, Doug and I wanted to take all of our kids out together to see how they were going to get along with each other. And we love to go to movies together. So we were at the movie theater, and we got inside, and there was the concession stand with all the candy and popcorn and drinks. And Doug had everybody line up and say, well, come on, come and choose what you want. You can have candy, you can have popcorn, you can have a drink. And my kids looked at me like, really, Mom? Are you sure? Because I had taken them to a movie, but I never had enough money that they could each have their own popcorn or drink or candy. We always had to share. And so they looked at me, and I looked at Doug, and Doug said, sure, you can get whatever you want. Everybody can choose their own candy, their own popcorn, and have their own drink. Well, my kids thought they were in heaven. They thought he was the greatest guy ever. So, and he is. There was a man in our ward who was going to teach parenting classes. His name was D. Hadley. He was a teacher up at the University of Utah Institute, and he was one of my neighbors and a good friend, and he announced in church that he was going to be teaching parenting classes. So I mentioned it to Doug, and I said, would you like to come to these parenting classes with me? He said, yes, I would love to. So we started going. It was every Sunday night for about 8 weeks, and Brother Hadley would discuss with the rest of us in the class different skills of parenting. And this was very helpful to Doug and to me. We could express our comments about parenting, and we could learn about each other and what kind of a parent we would be if we combined our families. And we learned a lot. This was in 1984 when Doug and I were dating, and the Olympics were being held in California, in Los Angeles in 1984. Doug had a big motorhome. So we planned to take our children, all of them, and go down to San Diego. He had a timeshare there at the condos on the beach. So we went down, and there were 2 big rooms. So we put all the girls on one side, and we put all the boys on the other side of this condo. And it was really fun. And then the living room and kitchen were right in the middle. And while we were there, the Olympic torch was coming through San Diego. So Doug checked the schedule, and at 3 a.m., the torch would be coming down the street right outside our condo. So everybody woke up and went out on the balcony to watch the Olympic torch go by. What a memory. It was fun. After we left San Diego, we went up to Los Angeles, where the Olympics were going to be held. And Doug and I had tickets to go to the opening ceremony. Wow, that was pretty exciting. And we arrived early, and we had 2 tickets. So Doug decided to stand outside the gate of the stadium and to see how much these tickets would be worth to someone. And as I recall, people were willing to pay $200 or $300 each to go and buy our tickets and go in. And Doug and I looked at each other. Do we want to sell them, or do we want this memory? And we decided we wanted the memory for ourselves. So we went in and watched the Olympic opening game for the Olympics in 1984 in Los Angeles. It was really, really special. And at that time I thought, Doug Bagley is really, really special. Doug and I got married in September 22nd, 1984. We combined our families. We had 9 children at that time. I had 6, Doug had 3, and then we added our wonderful John Dean Bagley in 1988. So now we had 10 children, and people have asked me, what is it like to raise 10 children? It's been very humbling. It was very busy. I often wonder myself, how did I do it? Doug and I decided we would give 100% to our children and to our family. Doug owns A1 Pioneer Moving and Storage. He worked hard to support this size of a family, but he was home every night. We were home on the weekends, and we devoted our life to these 10 children. We are just grateful they all didn't choose the same day or the same week to be mischievous. They were normal kids. They are not perfect. Doug and I aren't perfect, but we certainly had fun together. We got along. We went to church every week together. We vacationed together. We had family home evenings together. We tried to read scriptures every day together. And I tell you, these children have grown up to be beautiful adults, married in the temple, wonderful children who have given us, at this point, 32 beautiful grandchildren. We are very blessed, and I thank my Heavenly Father every day for Doug and for this wonderful family that I have been blessed with here on earth. On October 20th, 2004, I suffered a brain hemorrhage. All of a sudden, I had the most extreme headache that I had ever experienced. I was able to call for help before I totally collapsed, and I was rushed to the hospital. Doug called all our children, who met up at the University of Utah Hospital, which is a hospital who can handle such a traumatic brain injury. The doctors didn't know at that point if I would survive. It was very scary for them, and it was scary for me. I've thought a lot about how going through this brain hemorrhage has affected my life. What did I learn from it? I learned to be grateful for every day that I was alive. While I was up there recovering, I was in the intensive care unit for almost a month, and I had to remain absolutely still so that the blood from the brain bleed would be reabsorbed into my body. And every day I would lay there in bed at night, tears running down my face. How grateful I was to have survived. How grateful I felt at that time for Doug and for our children and for all the love and support that I felt from them. After experiencing this brain hemorrhage, I made a list of things in life that only I can do. And I've tried to focus on those things so that I could write my personal history, so that I could write the feelings that I have for my family, for the gospel, for all the blessings and miracles that I have experienced. I'm now 72 years old, and I feel so blessed and so grateful for the chance that I have had to live, to experience joy and happiness. We have experienced sadness and grief, just like everyone else, but I have had more days of joy and happiness. I have an appreciation for good quotes. I have a quote that I keep in my bathroom where I can see it every day, and it says, "I hope that I can realize every day the heaven that I have surrounding me." I certainly feel that I am experiencing heaven on earth. I enjoy Doug so much. I truly love him. I enjoy my children and my grandchildren. And I think by experiencing this brain hemorrhage, I have a greater appreciation for the gospel, for my testimony, for my family, and for every day that I am able to be here on earth. I'd like to talk about church service. I've had many callings in the church, and I think that if I could say my favorite calling was Relief Society president. You know, a lot goes on behind closed doors, and we don't need to know everything that's going on with people. But as I served as Relief Society president, I gained such an appreciation for the bishop. Our bishop I served with was Bishop DeBry and Bishop Stringham. They devoted 100% of their time to serve our Heavenly Father and to serve the people of the Olympus First Ward. I learned to love the sisters in our ward. I loved them. As I would drive through the neighborhood, I would look at their homes and think about the sweet sister inside. I could reflect upon the problems that they were having, on the help that they needed. Their children, their grandchildren. I really, really enjoyed that calling. I enjoyed serving. I enjoyed visiting teaching, and it still is one of the favorite things I can do to serve right now, is visiting teaching. The Relief Society program is fabulous. It is truly inspired, and I am grateful for those 4 years that I was able to serve as Relief Society president. I think the most fun calling I had in church was in the primary. I was lucky enough to serve as primary president as well. Beautiful, beautiful children were in that ward. Primary children are still beautiful, but it gave me the opportunity to work directly with the children, to teach them. I loved music, I loved teaching, I loved everything about primary. The stories were powerful. It was so fun to see these beautiful children with their eyes lit up as they learned about the gospel, as they sang the songs with enthusiasm. The primary program is certainly inspired. We have wonderful leaders who prepare the lessons, who are inspired with these beautiful primary programs that are given every year. we are certainly blessed with good leaders who are working hard to make sure that this church goes forward. The primary program certainly has my heart. I've also served in Young Women's. I haven't been the Young Women's president, but I have been a counselor 2 or 3 times. And I just ended serving in Young Women's, believe it or not, about 6 months ago. The young women are beautiful, beautiful people. And it was fun to teach them, to be with them. This time around, it was harder because I wasn't able to physically go on all the hikes with them and do all of the experiences. I remember in my youth, ice skating around the rink with no problem. This year I tried to get on ice skates and, it wasn't going to work. I couldn't do it anymore. But the girls were cute and they understood and accepted it. Girls' camp was especially fun this year. We went up to Midway, Utah, and had a wonderful experience there. It's fun to see these girls get testimonies. This is a tender time in their life when they are trying to build and strengthen their testimony. And it was fun for me to be there and to help them as they develop this testimony at this tender time in their life. I love family history. It has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I love to hear the stories my grandparents would tell me. I loved it when my parents told me stories from their childhood. I have been so blessed by my parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. They kept journals. They wrote their histories. They recorded their life, their disappointments, their achievements, everything about it. And we have certainly been blessed in family history. I would like to tell you about the Dean family. My grandparents, Marion and James Dean, came from Australia, and they met and married in Australia in 1901. In 1905, the gospel of Jesus Christ came into their lives as missionaries taught them. They listened to the missionaries. They gained a testimony of the gospel. And in 1909, they wanted to come to America. They wanted to bring their 5 children and come from Australia to Salt Lake City, where they could be sealed in the temple. It happened, and they did come. And my father, William C. Dean, was the first child born in Salt Lake, and he was born December 26th, 1909, just 6 months after they came to the United States. The Salzner family came from Germany. There they were in Germany. Georg Salzner was my great-grandfather, and the missionaries came to Germany, and he listened to them. My great-grandfather, Georg, had read an article in a magazine where it said, "The true Church of Christ, as it was when Christ lived on earth, is not here at the present time, but it will be restored." He took that article, he folded the piece of paper and put it in his coat pocket. And he thought to himself, I hope that I will be able to live to hear that the gospel has been restored, the true Church of Christ, as it was when Christ lived on earth. He was a traveling salesman, and he was at a home, a bed and breakfast type facility, when the lady of the house said, Mr. Salzner, there are some Americans here who would like to speak to you. Would you like to meet them? He said, yes. They came in, and there they bore testimony that the true church was on earth. And he took this paper out of his pocket, and he said, gentlemen, I have been waiting for you to bring this message. They taught him about the gospel. He was so excited and so thrilled to finally hear that the true church was restored here on earth. He then went back to his home, told his wife, and he had 2 children, Francis, or Franz in German, but Francis, they called him in America, and his sister Marie. And they came to America to be with the saints here in Utah. When they got here, they settled in Lehigh, and that's where he met his wife, Laura. And Francis and Laura were married here in 1893, the same year that the temple was dedicated. They were one of the first 50 couples to be married in the Salt Lake Temple. What a thrill. How grateful I am for their example. We also had a family named the Webbs, or the Wards. Marianne Ward Webb joined the church in England, and she and her sister Jemima went to London to earn money so that they could come to America and join the saints. This was in 1864 when they finally had enough money for passage to come from London to America. They joined the saints here in Nauvoo, and then joined the handcart companies and the wagon trains that brought them to Salt Lake Valley. They arrived in the Salt Lake Valley in 1864 and settled in Lehigh. Now, Mary Ann Ward married George Webb, who was also in that same company, but they didn't get married until they arrived in Lehigh, and they got married, and they had 10 children. My grandparents, Marion and James Dean, had 10 children. So Doug and I are fitting right in line. We have 10 children as well. Doug and I make it a tradition every Memorial Day to visit the cemeteries. And as we go to these grave sites, to the Deans, to the Salzners, to the Webbs, and to Doug's side of the family as well, we sit with our children and grandchildren and tell them stories. We tell them where the ancestors came from. And we always ask, what country did they come from? And why did they leave that country to come to America? And I hope our children and grandchildren never forget. They left their country to come to America, to come to Salt Lake, because they had a testimony of the gospel. And that is what we strive today, that our children and our grandchildren will have that same strong testimony in their hearts. This is the goal that I have. This is the wish. This is my desire, that everyone in my family will know that this church is true, that they will have a testimony that we got from our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents. My grandfather, Francis Salzner, served as mission president in the Swiss-German mission. He had a quote that he recorded, and I have loved this quote, and I want to read it so that those who are listening can have this in their mind. President Francis Salzner said, "Religion is not an idea. It is life. It is not to be debated, but lived. It is a force that inspires us to believe that war, injustice, prejudice, and selfishness can be stopped, and it arouses men to work to that end. The ethical implications of a man's religion are found in what a man does and how he treats others." End quote. What a beautiful thought. What a beautiful message. Doug Bagley and I have been very blessed. We've been blessed to have met and married and had a wonderful marriage together. We've been blessed with 10 beautiful children who are talented and wonderful, wonderful adults. We've been blessed with the spouses they have chosen to marry. We've been blessed with 32 grandchildren. On July 20th, 2013, we met in the Draper Temple, and we were able to have all of our family there. All of our children and their spouses. We also had Doug's sister and her husband, and my brothers and sisters and their husbands. What a special treat that was. That was certainly a day that I will remember and that I will cherish as a very, very spiritual day. I hope that we will be able to do it often, where we can meet together and be able to be in the temple together. That is my goal. There's a song that's in the church, in a primary song. It came just in the last, I don't know how many years, but it wasn't one I grew up with. But it is a song that I keep in my heart on a daily basis. Once I heard these words, I thought, I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember this every day of my life. And the song is, "If the Savior stood beside me, would I do the things I do? If the Savior stood beside me, would I say the things I say? And I pray every day that I will do and I will say words that are kind and loving and respectful to all people, not just my family, not just my friends, not just my ward members, but to all people, that I may truly be a disciple of Jesus Christ." There is another song that I like. It is called "Keep the Commandments." Keep the commandments. In this there is safety. In this there is peace. I feel that, again, in my experience, if you keep the commandments of the church, your life will be happier. It will be smoother. There will be less conflict. There will be harmony in your home. It is much better if everyone in the home is on the same page. When we keep the commandments and live the gospel, we will be happier people. I have found that to be true with my own life, and I hope you will find it in your life. My advice to my family would be to choose your friends wisely. There is a statement that says you become like the 5 people who surround you. Think about your 5 best friends. Think about the people you are with on a day-to-day basis. I hope you will choose friends that are uplifting. You will choose friends who strengthen you and who encourage you to study, to learn, to be kind, to be thoughtful. I hope you will spend your time wisely. Don't spend it on frivolous things. Enjoy life, of course. Enjoy life. Have fun. Right now I am teaching Relief Society. And this has been a good experience for me. I have learned to do a lot more reading and studying as I prepare for these lessons. I just recently read the Proclamation of a Family and the document, The Living Christ. These are beautiful, inspired documents that were given to us to make us better people and to be a direct instruction as to what our Heavenly Father wants us to know and how to live our life. I hope that you will read these documents, that you will study them. I know some of you have memorized the Living Christ. What a wonderful, wonderful document to memorize. I hope you will look at these documents often, and if you decide to memorize it, wonderful. That's wonderful. I have a testimony of this gospel. I am 72 years old now. I'm grateful I have lived this long. I had that serious, serious brain hemorrhage. My life could have ended that day. How grateful I am that it didn't. I'm thankful that I have been able to live, that I have good health, that I have a strong body, that I have a strong mind. I know what I'm doing, and I am thankful I can express myself. What I saw with my own parents that Doug and I have tried to keep with our family, and what I hope my children and grandchildren will do with their family. The things that we are taught year after year. Read the scriptures. Pray. Have family home evening. Attend the temple. Attend church every week. Even when Doug and I were traveling, regardless of where we were in the world, we would find a church and attend our church meetings. It was wonderful to see how the church operates throughout the world. It is the same wherever we go. This is an inspired church. I know that it is true. I have a testimony of Joseph Smith. He was an inspired prophet of his day, and we are so grateful for him, for all he did and all he suffered to see that the church was restored. I know that our Savior lives. I have a testimony of this, and I want my children and family to have a testimony of this. Please keep the commandments. Attend your church meetings. Love and be faithful to your spouse. Pray often. And I pray that we may together be an eternal family. This is my goal. This is what I desire. And this is what I want.